all from Microsoft, talking about a whole set of different technologies. I want to start by welcoming Annie Matthew, who will start off with the introduction. Thanks a lot, Annie, for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Pradeep. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone to the Microsoft Open Source Days. Thank you, Pradeep, for the Java community's engagement and bringing in the developers to join us today. So if you are someone who knew Microsoft from 20 years back, then open source and Microsoft were not words that you would use together. But we've come a long way since then. Satya Nadella actually talks about it in his book, Hit Refresh. He talks about the pivotal moment where he and Scott Guthrie, our CTO, actually, our head of engineering, actually met with some customers, came out, and in the car park, they were discussing that if we needed to succeed, we needed to become first-class citizens. We need to get Linux to be first-class citizens on Azure. And that started the journey. And it's amazing how one of the core elements that came out of it was, of that conversation, discussions at Spreadsheet, was that it was not just about getting the technology ready, but it was a cultural change that was required to embrace open source. Microsoft has been a company from inception of developers building software platforms to make other developers successful. And so that's where we started. Developers love open source, including Microsoft. And the second part was that we enable customers, but we needed to meet customers where they are today. All customers use open source in big and small ways. And so to meet customers where they were, we needed to meet developers where they are at the open source technologies, the communities, and so on and so forth. So Microsoft's open source strategy includes a couple of elements. The first is support our customers to use open source solutions, then enable Microsoft to use the best of breed open source solutions, the Microsoft developers themselves, and then reach developers and customers with Microsoft-led open source. That would be our contribution to the community and learning back from the community. And fundamentally, it is an ecosystem and the open source ecosystem. So contribute and support the open source ecosystem, which we all depend upon. So 3 parts to our approach. The first being enable. And I spoke about our focus on making Linux and similar open source platforms and tools a first-class citizen on Azure. So that's fundamental. And the second one is about releasing our contribution, open source contribution to this community. Let's look at TypeScript, for example. This is very interestingly, TypeScript, I don't know if you're aware that this is the founder or author of TypeScript is Anders Hellsberg, who's also the author of C#. And so with the whole support for supporting TypeScript as an open source language out there, we are kind of helping JavaScript developers, to make sure that they are removing bugs before the compile stage. So huge contribution from TypeScript. It's a massively growing community, and that's an open source project we support. Similarly, R is another language. Many of you may not be aware, but that's started off as an open source project from Microsoft. Hugely supported by Microsoft. It's still an open source project. So a lot of .NET Core is another one. VS Code is another one where we contribute. So a lot of these contributions from Microsoft developers into the open source development out there. And the third one is to contribute and partner with other, like say Red Hat, for example, is a great example, the Red Hat OpenShift. So we partner with Red Hat and make sure that their contributions are actually supported well from Azure side, and hence the Red Hat OpenShift offering on Azure. And similarly, there are tons of others like Ubuntu, Kubernetes, and others where we take very active participation in these open source projects. Now, this all, it's interesting to see how this whole open source conversation shifted over the years. Maybe a decade back, people thought that open source projects meant not-for-profit projects. But then it has morphed into, say, like the Red Hat one, where the open source projects actually have commercial applications. So across enabling our customers to build on open source, enabling our developers to use open source better, to releasing open source projects, to contributing and partnering with our ecosystem partners to get more open source products on Azure and from Azure is the strategy that we have. So today there's an awesome lineup of speakers. Pradeep mentioned that in the beginning. The next 2 hours is going to be a really fun ride as you hear from you will hear on a couple of elements, one on the cloud native development using open source. The other one is about the app modernization and migration using open source. And you will also hear about Java in particular from Jay, and then a little bit on AI from Julia. So a great lineup of content and speakers. Feel free to talk to us on the chat. There's also a Discord channel. You can come join the community and talk more. But without further ado, let me hand it back for the first speakers to come on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie, for giving us so much insights about Microsoft and open source. Now we will be moving towards the tech keynote, which is a pre-recorded video from Microsoft. So now we will be playing that video.
Hello, and welcome to our third Azure Open Source Day. I'm your host, Sarah Novotny, Director of Open Source Strategy here at Microsoft. This year, our focus is on how to combine open source and AI to build intelligent apps. We have lots of exciting stuff for you today, including a panel discussion on how open source and AI are changing software development, a grand unified demo showing how to build an intelligent app using open source, Azure, and then we also have AI fireside chats with NVIDIA and Web 3.0. With that, let's get into our panel discussion. To make this really fun, some of these questions have been generated by ChatGPT. At the end, we'll ask our panelists to identify which questions they think came from the AI, and then we'll reveal it to you at the end of the show. So now we get an opportunity to hear from our panelists. So let's go ahead and do introductions. Cassie, I think you're up first.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Zimmerman. I'm the Senior Director of Cloud Alliances at Redis Inc.
Thank you. And Joy Lynn?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Jolene Kirui. I'm a Senior Cloud Security Advocate at Microsoft.
And thank you, Joy Lynn, for joining us at an odd hour in your time zone. And who's up next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jake Lundberg, Field CTO at HashiCorp. We create ever popular products such as Terraform, Vault, Packer, and Vagrant. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And lastly, not lastly, we have someone else in the office, Stormy, on our panel display. Stormy, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, Sarah. My name is Stormy Peters, and I'm VP of Communities at GitHub. And I'm super excited to be here talking with you all today.
And Brendan.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Brendan Burns, Corporate Vice President for Cloud Native Open Source on Azure.
So we're going to start with some of these questions for you all. Remember, some have been generated by ChatGPT, so keep this in mind as you're doing this. We can even kibitz and guess as we go if you like. How has the open source landscape changed in recent years? And what impact have these changes in open source had on your businesses? And I think, Stormy, you were going to lead this one off, right?
Yeah, so we have been doing this for a while. I've been in open source software for 25 years. I think you've also been working in it for a while. I think it's more exciting than ever now. So at GitHub, we just celebrated 100 million developers on our platform. I mean, like who even, like just, I can't even imagine a number that big, 100 million developers working on open source software. And then I think two things have, I think there's two things right now that are really making an impact. I think the first is like who's contributing to open source is changing. Like it's always been global, like the open source software community has always been really good at working globally. But based on the Octoverse report that we did recently, we've seen like lots of growth across India and China and Brazil. Like India has almost 10 million people on GitHub, with 2.5 million of them in the last year alone. Africa's been really crazy. Like overall, Africa has gone up 40%, but like in Nigeria, we saw a 69% jump in the developer population. And so I think this is like, we're evolving who can contribute, and we're getting more diverse and more insights and more people's opinion in it. And I think tools like Codespaces, I know Codespaces is from GitHub, but I'm kind of in love with it. Like your development environment is all just there in the cloud when you log in. And so that means like in education, especially during COVID, we saw educators be able to bring students online right away. We see people without access to like high-end computers are able to do all their development in the cloud. People who might not have steady internet can be part of this world. So we're really seeing a lot of changes. And we're also seeing the framework for how we work between open source software developers and companies is evolving. Like, a lot of people always wanted a full-time job working at open source, but now we're actually seeing a lot of those companies realize that they depend on that open source and trying to give back and trying to figure out how to amp up security and how to fund the developers that they depend on. So like with GitHub sponsors, we've seen millions of dollars come from companies like Microsoft, American Express, Mercedes-Benz, and go to the developers that are working on the software that they depend on. So I think we're seeing the ecosystem change in like really exciting ways that will make it more accessible and sustainable for all of us.
Yeah, and I see Cassie nodding, so I'm wondering, you may very well have a very different perspective of how your business has changed, but you can certainly see some of Stormy's points. So what are you seeing, Cassie?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with the points that Stormy made. I'd love to shed a little bit of light on the perspective from how we're seeing customers use open source. In addition to that, I saw a report from 2022 that said something like 76% of companies reported that they increased their usage of open source software in the past year, and under 2% actually said that they decreased their usage of open source software. And it hasn't always been that way. I've been with Redis for 6.5 years, and in the early days, open source softwares were looked at as with wary eyes. People were a bit concerned about, are they reliable enough? Are they secure enough? You know, what are these projects out there? And we've really seen that change. Some of the largest enterprise customers in the world and, you know, small startups, digital natives are really building their businesses on open source communities, softwares, thanks to these vibrant communities out there that have continued to invest. So to us, you know, I think we love it. There's so much power now in the hands of the developers to choose what types of technologies they want to use to create great software. And I think open source has such a huge part to play in that change.
That's some very clear, interesting ways that this is changing and changing our businesses. So Jake or Joylyn or Brendan, one of you have a thought on this? Why don't we go with Jake, because he's grinning.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I mean, as a open source core company, and that we build our products off from the projects that are available, there's a couple different factors that are open here. The fact that, you know, Red Hat had such a successful model that allowed folks to bring those type of products into their enterprises has really opened the door for that next generation of open source vendors to also do similar types of models. And so there's lots of other factors here. You have investment. People are willing to invest in companies like ours, like folks took a chance on us, and that actually paid off for them. And not only that, but like Stormy was saying, we've opened up this ability to spread our developers out worldwide. And as a remote first company, we now have the sort of luxury of being able to pick from a much larger pool of candidates to be able to work for us, both on the projects, not inside the company, but also as talent within the company as well. So it's two different avenues in which we can get folks to contribute to the software that are here. And then the related industries, right? So Terraform, for instance, has lots of different providers that control lots of different infrastructure. And it's actually very refreshing that the vast majority of them aren't created by us at HashiCorp. They're actually created by the community. And so it allows people to integrate lots of other software, lots of other hardware into their environments by doing so.
Maybe Joylyn, do you have thoughts about open source and security and how they connect into a product decision like this for an end customer? Like, how do you help them frame that thought process?
Yes, sure. In terms of open source and third-party dependencies, we have something called software composition analysis, whereby we incorporate and automate security into your software development lifecycle to identify security vulnerabilities in your dependencies. And we also have a framework by Microsoft. It's called the S2C2F. So that's the Secure Supply Chain Consumption Framework, which was released a couple of months ago, should be like 3 months ago. So this helps companies to make sure that you are securely consuming your open source software dependencies into your developers' workflow. So you need to make sure that you know each component that you're absorbing or you're incorporating within your company. So you also need to have like a software bill of material, which is what we call the SBOM. So at least you know what component is actually vulnerable, because for sure we are incorporating so many components. Like a typical company would have like maybe in the likes of maybe even thousands of softwares within a particular company. So how do you keep track of that? How do you make sure that all those dependencies are secure?
Within Microsoft, it's more than 60,000 dependencies on open source software in more than 9.5 million places in our code base, which is just crazy. Yeah, there's so much in, even just as a large consumer of software and a large producer of software, there's so much to consider in these different choices that we make. How do you think open source can be used to drive technological progress, and how do you see your companies playing into this regard? Do you think open source can be used to foster collaboration and cooperation? Is this something you're seeing in the industry? Discuss amongst yourselves.
I think I'll take the contrasting view, I guess, and say that I really do think it does drive innovation in the sense that, in sort of two senses. One is that at an industry level, a lot of the vendor neutral open source allows for competitors to come together, right? So in a way where, whether it's in the telco industry or in the cloud industry, where two competitors might not be able to collaborate directly, but they trust if they can contribute to a vendor neutral forum where the intellectual property, the trademark, and all of the sort of intellectual assets are stored, they can then collaborate in that context, right? And so we've collaborated with any number of our competitors in that context. And then I think the other part of it is the definition of open interfaces, whether it's the open container image format or going back in history to HTML and HTTP. But these open interfaces form a basis for kind of saying, not my problem, right? Like below this, I'm a server and I know how to serve HTML. Above this, I'm a thing that knows how to take HTML and turn it into a picture. That enables parallel development and parallel innovation. And those interfaces can't exist without open source, right? Because otherwise you get companies that tightly bind the server side and the client side together, and you don't have that parallel innovation. So I actually really strongly feel, and maybe it's the difference of like a broad industry participant as opposed to a more focused company. But I think there's a lot that happens because the collaboration unlocks the ability to move quickly.
It is definitely something that Microsoft focuses on, is making sure that our partners have a strong ecosystem around them and have the ability to make money within the platform ecosystem that we build here. Yeah. Like this is just such a core company value at this point, I think.
I mean, I would even put it a little bit stronger. I would said it more strongly in other contexts, which is I think we have an obligation, right? As a cloud provider, we make a ton of money off of people running open source on our platform. And that only happens if there's successful open source communities. And it turns out open source developers still need to eat food, still need to pay for shelter. So they need to have successful businesses too, right? And so if we want to have a successful cloud, we have to have a successful open source community. And that means figuring out how to partner. So.
Stormy or Joylyn, anything to add, or do we go on to question 4?
So your question was, does open source drive technological progress, and does it help people collaborate? And my short answer is I absolutely think open source software helps people collaborate. It provides a framework. It provides a place for them to go to look for people to work with, for code to join a project, to participate in it. And even from the very beginning with the Linux kernel, got companies that hadn't traditionally ever written software together to write software. We still see it now with like the Academy Software Foundation, with like the next generation of movies from Marvel and Pixar is being developed in open source together from competing companies. And so I think just having it as a place and a framework helps everyone collaborate together.
Yeah, this speaks again to the co-opetition that happens because the technology has advanced sufficiently far that there's a lot that's been commoditized, and so we can compete. We don't need to compete where it's a commodity, and instead we want to compete on different and innovative things. All right.
Hey, Sarah,
Joy?
can I add one last
Please.
thing on that topic?
Yeah.
Because I think the long-term partnership between these companies like Redis and Microsoft is important. It's not a one and done thing. And as an example, today we've actually announced Redis JSON with active georeplication natively on the Azure platform. That is only possible, through partnership and through the type of stance like Brendan outlined very well that Microsoft takes with open source technology companies. So really giving developers the ability to do more with the technologies that they love. In this case today, it happens to be JSON on Redis.
Well, thank you for being a wonderful partner, and thank you HashiCorp for being a wonderful partner as well. And GitHub too, but GitHub sort of captured partner. Speaking of progress, how do you think the rise of artificial intelligence is going to impact open source, and what role do you think these technologies are going to have in the upcoming future of open source and AI as they intersect?
Can I take the dystopian view?
You can take the dystopian view.
So I thought it was fascinating to see that Stack Overflow went and tried to ban ChatGPT from responding to questions. And I've thought about the kind of spam PRs that we get every once in a while. I mean, it's a bit of an issue sometimes. And I'm definitely a little worried that people are going to somehow take this and use it to do typo fixes and other sorts of kind of spammy PRs. We're already in a place where it's hard to review everything and give everything its due and make sure that new contributors feel welcome at the same time as people who are trying to just gamify open source are not necessarily getting rewarded. So I think we have to be a little careful as we look at these generative technologies. It's great that it's going to empower people for sure, but also hopefully it'll only empower people who are going to do good things and not bad things.
Exactly. Right. All right. What about?
I have a really good example of the good things people can do.
Let's go.
Yeah, because I think AI and ML are to software development like calculators and computers were to math. But last November, I got to meet a man named Ben who works for the Norwegian Refugee Council. And when the Ukraine crisis happened and all the refugees were leaving, they were doing a new way of responding, and actually letting people transfer money directly to people on the ground that needed it. And so he had to write all this new software to help get applications and transfer money. And he used Copilot, and one person trying to solve this whole problem. And he said Copilot was like having an engineer sitting next to him, helping him the whole time. So it really enabled him to respond to this crisis much faster. And he said when he got on the airplane, it was actually like the person disappeared for a while. And he said he kind of didn't know what to do and he missed his buddy.
I've heard it described as pair programming as well. Same idea, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of mixed. I grew up with the typical sci-fi classics, 2001, Terminator, the first thing I tend to err towards is like that human beings have a way of like being very bad to each other and using technology sort of misapplied towards sort of harming each other. But I think one of the things that's very interesting, and especially in say the last 20, 30 years, is that we've seen a fundamental shift where it used to be like the military and governments had an inordinate usage of these particular kinds of technology. You think about DARPANET and ARPANET, or the creators of the internet that we have. But as the software revolutions really happen, and the sort of commodification and the federation of our capabilities, open source software especially, is that now we are seeing that a lot of these corporations are actually ahead of the governments and ahead of the militaries in terms of what it is that they develop from a tools perspective. And so we may be at that inflection point just in human history where the actual usefulness of the software outside of harming each other could actually far outweigh the tools that we're building to actually enable us and accelerate us further. And there's lots of like interesting things within the science communities about just like overall consciousness and how we get towards that next stage of human evolution. And so we see that in some of the especially in things like Copilot, enabling people to accelerate specific types of workflows in very good ways. But I've also I'm not going to quote the title of this guy. The author is Dara O'Brien. It's called ChatGPT and the Unblink, sort of leaping of knowledge. If you go out and search for it, DARAGH is the first name, and it really just kind of gives a lens as to the kind of mistakes that AI and ML can make currently. And it's really still in its infancy, in my opinion. And so while there's a lot of bad stuff that we can do with these technologies, I think that as we start to mature and really figure out how to accelerate some of our other processes, this becomes very, very important. There is one risk though. So this is just coming from us and people who develop open source software, is that as we begin to spread out the type of technologies that folks can focus on, we may actually have less contributors to some of the other projects that are out there, because it's the Wild West. There's a lot of opportunity that's out there that folks can go out and create the new next generation open source communities that create these products that can hopefully help them sort of raise themselves up on the economic ladder. And so we may actually see the case that like some of this dilutes the development that we may get towards other projects. And I'm not saying that's bad or good or bad, but it may actually impact companies like HashiCorp and some of the rest of us that are here, and that talent is going towards other projects or products that we may not be developing. So that's my main concern on the downside, and of course all the sci-fi stuff that goes with it.
All right, Cassie or Joy Lynn, anything on this?
I would just add, I think everyone is just amazed by ChatGPT and the advancements that we've seen, even in just the past couple of weeks around the world. I can't go on LinkedIn without there being a post right away about ChatGPT and AI taking over the world. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it influences open source software development. I think we'll all be contributing and also bystanders to watching this next kind of generation of software development. But I think the really big opportunity here will be in machine learning. I think there's a ton of great examples of ways that it can improve businesses, give us better insights, and improve, everybody's day-to-day lives. But we've all read the scary stories about AI and the dangers around it as well. So hopefully we manage those appropriately.
All right. Anyone else? Last thoughts? Well, then let me say thank you to each of you for joining us and for engaging with these questions. Stick with us till the end of the show, and then we can tell what the answers are. Which of these questions were made?
Thank you for being here, Donovan.
So finally, we do get to have a little fun with the show. We've been asking you if these are ChatGPT generated questions or not. I have the big secret information right here. Please hold.
A drum roll.
All of them were in fact created by GPT. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Over to you, Chaitanya.
I hope you had a great time watching the tech keynote. If not, then don't worry. We have so many interesting things coming up right now. Now, for those who are asking about the flow of event, so this is going to be the flow of event. We will be having our first session on Accelerate Cloud Journey with Azure Migration and Modernization Program by Inu Mittal and Paul Datta. Then we will be having Build Cloud Native Application in Azure by Alain. Then after that, we will be having Update Existing Apps to Cloud Native Cloud First Model by Jay Lee. Then last but not the least, Azure AI Services by Dr. Julia. Now let's move on to our first session, which is Accelerate Cloud Journey with Azure Migration and Modernization Program. This session will be presented by an Inu Mittal and Paul Datta. Inu is a highly effective leader with over 15 years of industry experience of delivering complex projects. She is working as a customer success leader and strategist at Microsoft Singapore. Along with Inu, we have Paul Datta with us. Paul is a technologist who has more than 15 years of hands-on experience of building web products and scaling them using cloud infrastructure. He is working as a cloud solution architect, developer advocate at Microsoft Singapore. Over to you, Inu and Paul. Welcome to the Azure Open Source Day.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited and honored for the opportunity to share my point of view on modernization and migration of applications in this era of digital transformation. Today, we will share what are the main triggers for application migration and modernization, what we have learned from our customers and developers while they continue to adopt cloud technologies and best practices. My colleague Paul Datta will enlighten us about Azure AMP program, few customer stories, and next steps. I am Inu Mittal, Customer Success Leader for Digital and Application Innovation at Microsoft. With me joins today Paul Datta, our Senior Cloud Solution Architect and Dev Advocate at Microsoft APAC. So we asked our customers, developers, and community leaders for their biggest driver for cloud consumption. Take a guess. Is it sales teams, programs, cloud solution architects, or funding, licenses, discounts, or latest technology, support, or just the necessity to migrate to cloud? Then we started combining the results and realized it's not programs, architects, or sponsors, not even discounts and fundings, or cloud technologies or support. The center of all is organizations, and the success lies with our developers. So it is you, the people, the developers, which make organizations success and take them to the digital transformation era. So what does the organizations need? Just two things: acceleration of their workloads and excellence with what they do. Acceleration. We have best practices of adopting cloud migration and modernization concepts, resiliency and scale via modern cloud-native application architectures, faster and seamless delivery and deployment while the developers continue to innovate. And excellence via increased developer productivity, dev engagement, and embracing the developer's point of view, optimal cost, and secure application and architectures. Migration and modernization to cloud have several triggers in common when our customers think about their digital transformation. Common one includes cash flow challenges. This includes cash flow challenges not just for our customers, but also their entire ecosystem, like suppliers, distributors, and customers. Moving CapEx to OpEx help make a P&L predictable by paying only for what is consumed. Cybersecurity threats. customers are feeling more vulnerable to attackers with a dispersed and hybrid workforce. Scarce IT budget and resources. Customers are reporting the need to free up the IT dollar to invest into other parts of the business that may need it more. And not to forget, rapidly scaling web apps and infrastructure to meet the surge demand. Several industries such as healthcare, retail have been seeing a surge in demand. They're finding that their existing systems and solutions just cannot keep up. And application innovation and faster time to market. Developers can resonate very well with this. So the ability to innovate fast was key to several businesses to survive lockdowns and changes in customer spending pattern, like enabling curbside pickup in applications, enabling telehealth visits for medical needs. Also, for organizations, the data center contract expiry is one of the driver. So many customers, when we speak to, are viewing contract expiries as an inflection point to consider cloud migration. Is it worth running my own given resources and cash flow challenges? Or should I consider moving to cloud? And we all know about it, enabling hybrid work. With lockdowns of 2020 and an increasing hybrid workforce, cloud adoption is the key to maintaining productivity and business continuity. Cloud migration and modernization is a continuous process that involves significant organization change management spanning people, process, and technologies. So taking a holistic approach will not only help you navigate towards cloud successfully, but also ensure that your organization realizes new benefits, including efficiency, agility, and scale once your workloads are running in the cloud. When we talk about this journey, define your strategy, define and document your motivations, define why you're migrating and modernizing, document the business outcome that you want to achieve and your motivations, such as exiting your data center, increasing cost savings, or designing for greater agility. And don't forget to involve and align key stakeholders. Facilitate a smoother, faster migration that meets organizational goal by enlisting the broad support. Create a center of excellence with a cross-functional team made up of IT, finance, and business owners. And then engage a cloud migration modernization partner. Augment your cloud skill set and reduce risk as you migrate and modernize your workload. Team up with a managed service provider that offers support through the entire process and beyond. And most important, plan your move. Discover and assess your applications, databases, and infrastructure. Get insights into your dependencies using automated cloud migration tool. We have it. Come, seek help. Inventory your infrastructure and assess your on-prem environments. Get right sizing guidance, workload level cost estimates, and performance metrics. Make a business case for migration and modernization. Evaluate the potential cost saving for migrating to Azure by calculating and comparing your total cost of ownership for Azure with that of a comparable on-prem deployment. You would be surprised the agility, scalability, and long-term resiliency you gain along with best practices and cost savings. And then build a holistic plan with all these viewpoints. Account for workload priorities, timelines, milestones, resources, and funding. Then break up your overall plan into migration and modernization projects, each with a group of related workloads. And then get a buy-in from leadership. I'm sure they would be supportive. And your new migration center of excellence. We're all in this together and we understand your challenges. We want to help you elevate your help you, and we will reduce your risk and help you get started on the journey with confidence. You want a consistent migration and modernization methodology. You need a specific guidance around building a migration plan. You want to make sure that your team is trained up. You are upskilled. You need a robust migration tool. You want assistance with more workload scenario, or you just want to talk, reach out. We are there to help you. With that, I invite Paul Datta to share details on Azure Modernization and Migration Program. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Inu, for the intro, and thank you folks for joining this talk and for spending time with us today. It's very essential for you to understand that Microsoft wants to be part of your success journey and be a partner with you at every step of transformation. So the Azure Migration and Modernization Program, which was the title for this talk, is a structure that allows you to actually involve us right from the point when you want to migrate to the cloud, through the entire journey. And this program helps to simplify and accelerate your cloud adoption. We've done this successfully with thousands of customers. We've helped them unlock the benefits of the cloud. And we do this by bringing in the right mix of expert and partner help, along with Microsoft best practices, given our experience here. It's very prescriptive. It goes from assessments to planning to execution. And we also try and do this in a way in which there are incentives from start to finish for you to be a successful cloud adopter. Now, along with guaranteeing sustainable outcomes, we also help you move with confidence by helping skill your organization, not just with upskilling programs, but we also have direct assistance from Azure engineers and specialized partners. So to summarize, this program delivers best practices, technical skill building, fast track for Azure engineering, which provide assistance for data and infrastructure foundations, expert guidance from specialized partners, and a lot of free tools that you can use like Azure Migrate for you to successfully execute migration projects. There are a lot of cost-effective offers that you can get access to by reaching out to your Microsoft certified partner or by looking at the public information available on our website. Now, the slide shows some common migration scenarios. I'm sure you have a lot of specific ones as well. The most common ones are infrastructure lift and shifts, where we move Windows Server, SQL Server, VMware, Linux to the cloud. We also offer assistance with a lot of VDI workloads. We have a strong apps and data modernization focus. I'm going to be touching upon this in subsequent slides. And we also have a new offer, which is moving SAP landscapes to Azure. And for each of these, we have a prescriptive guidance on how to assess and plan, how to do pilots and POCs, how to sort of knit together Azure security services from start to finish. And the overall objective of this program is for you to feel comfortable moving to the cloud and for you to also adopt the right services on the cloud. So this unified approach takes care of assessments and readiness. So you have the right strategy in place, and this is based on the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework and the well-architected framework. So you'll get support across the breadth of migration and modernization through all the scenarios that you have that cuts across applications, data, and infrastructure. And the objective is to use Azure Hybrid Cloud Solutions as you plan and execute this move. So business case creation, DCO analysis, and catered guidance is what we start with. There's also a huge emphasis on savings. More on this once you start talking to a Microsoft partner that can guide you through this journey on how to tap into some of these offers. And we have a strong focus on sustainability, which is a whole different talk in itself. But it's interesting, and I recommend you look up what we have to say in terms of energy efficiency on the Microsoft.com website. Now, when you want to move to the cloud, it's important that you mitigate risks and you take full advantage of Azure because Azure offers you security, scale, and innovation. And along with this, you also need your organization to be ready to start using and tapping into the benefits the cloud offers. So building cloud skills is also something that is at the top of our list because this ensures long-term organization readiness. And we offer a lot of specialized learning options that I also recommend you reach out to your Microsoft certified partner or to Microsoft directly. Reach out to us and we can help you with upskilling. Now, in terms of prescriptive guidance, there are a lot of self-guidance that is available, but as part of our upskilling, we're happy to bring in all of our learnings from your assessment and from your journey into this so that the training plans that we offer are also specific to you. I recommend you look at customers.microsoft.com. There are a lot of success stories over there. You might find similarities with what your organization is trying to do. And if you're a developer who's logged in here, the word migration can be quite daunting, but there is a role that you have to play because in many cases, it might involve moving legacy applications to the cloud that you built using different tech. And you might be excited to use managed services and different sorts of databases and get access to a lot of cloud scale that Azure offers. Take a look at these success stories and identify scenarios that apply to you because they also have a lot of best practices embedded with them that talk about scale and also talk about timelines. So you have a realistic view as to how long it takes to move some of these to the cloud because that's very dependent on how you execute the program. For instance, Boston Pizza, the first example, they have 400 outlets across Canada. And when they decided to move some of their workloads to Azure, they experienced a 30% decrease. And they also experienced a rapid reduction in time to market for their application workloads. Now, all of these benefits can only happen if you have a plan and you also have the right readiness in place to execute that plan. Another interesting example is Planzer, which did a lift and shift of 200 servers to the cloud. Now, this also involved a lot of data. And of course, they worked with partners. They also took a lot of help from Fast Track, and they also used a lot of the readiness assessments that we have in place. So these customer stories are just for you to understand that we've done this at scale, and our partners are also aware of the process and aware of how to involve Microsoft experts at the right time, and also the tools that we offer in this space. Now, given that the initial part of this talk, Inu did mention innovation, modernization, and she made a strong case for the developers of the organization to be empowered for the organization to be successful. This is really true, and I strongly believe this, that while you can transform with Azure, a strong part of your transformation is your developer community. Of course, Azure offers products that enable this innovation, right? Right from, I would say, if your goal is to modernize apps, build cloud-native apps, you want to collaborate and contribute to open source, you want to bring in data and AI into your enterprise apps, you want to use low code, you want to start on a bit of DevOps and then expand that whole thing. Microsoft supports you with an entire gamut of tools to help increase your velocity and enable your developers. And it also offers a lot of choice. And the choices extend from productivity to what kind of database you want to use, whether you want to use a PaaS or a low code. So it makes a lot of emphasis on how you want to design innovation, how you want to involve developers, and what sort of learnings developers need to inculcate for them to take advantage of what's on Azure in order for you to innovate. And the recent trend that you see in terms of, say, Copilot coming into to GitHub, into M365, and now they've announced Copilot into Microsoft security products, tells you that there's always going to be a focus on assistance and intelligence built into our products. So the moment you start using our products and you have access to this intelligence and innovation, you start to think about, how do I bring these benefits into my line of business applications? How do I bring in what Copilot is doing on GitHub, where you request for a function and it generates code for you? Or you ask a question on Bing Chat and it gives you a summarized answer. How do I bring those benefits into the workplace, into what I do in my business applications that I'm modernizing on the cloud? So if you look at this slide, it does talk about what are sort of the core fundamental modernization approaches where you can start containerizing your applications, or you can start building low-code applications out of legacy apps that were hard to maintain. But the crux of this is that, given that these platforms exist for you to consume, you must have a strategy that involves intelligence from the start, because you do want to improve experiences of users using your applications. And at the core of this is what we call developer velocity. Now, if you look at Azure.com, if you look at learn.microsoft.com, you will see and have access to, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. You will have access to a lot of learning content that describes how to modernize applications. But you'll also see that Microsoft has the most comprehensive developer tool ecosystem for developers, starting from Microsoft Azure to Power Platform to Microsoft Visual Studio, VS Code, and GitHub. And these tools have integrated collaboration. And this is essential especially as you as a developer start to master new skills. Because if you are innovating and if you're building at a rapid pace, you also have to adopt new technology at a rapid pace. But we give you the benefit to bring along your favorite open source tools, your favorite languages of choice, your favorite frameworks, and take advantage of what Azure has to offer. Now, I spoke of dev velocity. We do have a study that we conducted with a partner of ours called McKinsey, where we looked at all of the software development practices and technologies, working practices, organization enablement practices, and we try to converge this into what we call the Developer Velocity Index. So it takes a look at technology, it takes a look at working practices in organizations, engineering, security, compliance, inner source, agile practices. It also takes into account cultural elements of developer engagements within the enterprise, things like team building, product management, agility, how does talent work? Is there remote work enabled? And then it starts to score once you take the self-assessment across 46 drivers and 15 capabilities. Because we believe that developers have always been true catalysts of digital transformation, of innovation, and of performance. So I recommend that you take a look at the Developer Velocity Index on the Microsoft.com website. The links will be shared with you, and it's also on this presentation. And you'll also discover where you are as an organization and how mature you are in terms of our understanding of dev velocity. And you can actually benchmark yourselves in relation to your peers. And through this assessment, you can actually identify gaps in 3 domains: technology, working practices, and organization enablement. And it actually gives you a very detailed outcome report, which is actually quite nice to read. So with this, I'd like to do a quick recap and give you a chance to also ask questions in chat. In order for you to get started with your migration, you must do a readiness assessment. Here's a tool for you, self-service. It's not the only tool, and I'm sure you can do this yourself by talking to partners or by doing it internally. We do have a heat map tool here that you can sort of get started with. This is more for us to identify areas where you need help. I also recommend you talk to a specialized partner when it in order to build strategy. Given that our program helps you assess what applications are candidate apps for migration, how you could do pilots for this, how you can build a business case and get sponsorship for your migration program, how can you sort of build skills in your organization so they're ready to adopt the cloud, and how can you architect your cloud landing zone so that you can execute this migration. So with that said, I'll take a pause, and if there are any questions, we're happy to answer, or my colleague Alain has extra time to present his slides.
Well, thank you for your time today. Let's hand over to Alain. And even then, if you have questions, continue asking via chat. We are happy to answer. Alain, over to you.
Oh, I will
Alain,
unmute
yeah.
the mute
Yes.
thing. So thank you, Anu. Thank you, Paul. And yeah, I will gladly take that extra time. So let me getting started by actually sharing my screen. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm not seeing the chat, so we can kind of mute Jonathan, for example, and you just confirm that everything is fine. I have no view on Teams at all. Okay, hold on. We're good. Can someone come off mute to just confirm that you can actually properly see my slide, please?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
go ahead, Alain.
well, thank you, Paul. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alain Vetier. I'm a senior cloud solution architect based in Singapore. I actually works in his team along with Paul. And today I will be joined as well by my peer, Jonathan. Jonathan Young was a senior CSA engineer. And he will actually be monitoring the chat if you have any question during my talk, so to be able to provide a quick answer. So again, thank you for having me there today to walk you through a quick introduction on building cloud-native application on Azure, and I hope that you will have a great time. So let's get started with defining what is a cloud-native application from Microsoft perspective. So our point of view is when you start to build cloud-native application, you will basically build application upon these technologies that you see on the screen. So let's start with containers, serverless, data from a managed database perspective, and API-based solution. But it's not only about using these technologies, but it's about as well on how you use these technologies. So let me take you with an example with containers, for instance. We see a lot of customers moving to containers to actually take all the benefits from the containers. So think about increasing the density, think about the reliability that they provide, and think about the scaling that they provide. But when they do so, they often actually bring a monolith into their containers. So think about, for example, a 3-tier web app application that they bring with a front end, a business logic, and a database. And what they do is basically they just bring the front end, the business logic, and keep a monolithic database. So what they end up with is just a distributed monolith. It's not actually bringing more agility for the developers to be able to work on specific services, compartmented services from a microservices architecture perspective. And so this is a key point here is even if you rely on technologies that are used through cloud native, you need to also do a transformation into your architectures to embrace when using containers, for instance, a microservices architecture. And that allow you, and especially you as a developer, to actually iterate faster on a per service basis instead of doing a full release of an update for a full application, which usually takes a much longer time. So basically going back to the delivery model of waterfall to agile. So the second aspect in technology is serverless that we're looking at. When we use serverless, what we want to really do is actually work with event-driven architecture. Serverless takes benefit of spinning up compute to get runtime based on an event. That event could be an HTTP trigger, could be monitoring a queue, could be actually even look at a row in a database, and if there is any value change or a new value added, a new row, we can actually spin up that runtime, execute code upon it, and move to the next task. Managed database actually offer high scalability and as well built-in resiliency. So you want to be able to leverage these services to scale your application. Because again, if we take that example of distributed monolith, often in that case, you provide a great scaling, great performance level on application side of things, but the database becomes a bottleneck. So here we want to also apply the microservices best practices in terms of patterns, meaning each services should use its own data store, and that allow you to use the right tool for the right job. So why actually cloud-native applications are so important? Well, they allow our customers to actually scale to meet any demand. Think about seasonal demands, e-commerce, for example, super apps, for instance. And you can actually do that by achieving a greater resiliency because leveraging these managed services, they come with built-in disaster recovery capabilities, service continuity capabilities, and scaling capabilities. So think about reviewing your full demand level from a local fault domain to a zone fault domain to region fault domain. And in fact, this technology alone are not enough. You need to add at the core a DevOps practice. You want to be able to deliver this application in a highly automated way and more secure way. And this is achieved by adopting DevOps practices. So let's look now at the common cloud-native scenarios that we actually see across our customers. So the first one, business critical application modernization. Here, it's a strong use cases for e-commerce. think about e-commerce applications, super apps as well. We see a huge trend in FSI's industry where, in fact, they want to deploy this application in a microservices patterns to reach a better scale and also to maintain a performance level regardless of the load that is coming in. Think for e-commerce, for example, when there is a sale and they expect maybe 200 up to 500 more traffic, and they still want to provide the best experience to every single user. And in that case, embracing cloud-native architecture with microservices allow them to achieve that. Another approach that we see as well is actually customer building upon the APIs economy, where basically they want to take their applications and expose them as a set of APIs to build a SaaS delivery model. Also, when working with IoTs, real-time telemetry, we're actually facing a load change in terms of data that is incoming to our application. So we want to be able to ingest and process a high load of data, and that load can vary at any time. But it all means that we need a storage which will be able to automatically scale and fast scale. And on top of that, we need actually our processing compute to be able to do the same. And that's where the containers play also a very big part into the game. You can actually increase the number of containers that you have to process your data and you reduce them once the data has been processed and stored properly. Another trend as well is geo-distributed applications. So think about customers willing to go global, where they actually want to be able to provide the application to any user in the world, but in the same time, they want to be sure that they bring this data as close as they can to these end users. And there, thanks to the geo-replicating data services that we have coupled with DevOps, we can actually enable that. Another really interesting trend is the capability to run actually application anywhere. So we have customers with different strategies, cloud first, hybrid, multi-cloud, and these customers still have a common interest. They want to be able to run their application with consistency regardless of the location. And there we have a solution at Microsoft, which is called Azure Arc, that allow us to achieve such scenarios. We actually also have a practice behind the scene that is more global and from the open source related to Kubernetes. This is called the GitOps practice, where basically think about having multiple Kubernetes clusters deployed everywhere. And you want to apply what we call a zero-touch configuration to these clusters. So basically having a single configuration and ensuring that every single cluster across the world are compliant with that configuration. So the developer can trust the environment and deploy his application exactly the same way with the same parameters, the same variables everywhere. And this is in fact achieved through GitOps, where basically all the clusters will monitor a Git repo where we're going to store the configuration for these clusters. And then we have agents responsible to ensure that the right configuration is applied to all these clusters. And then lastly, another trend we see is actually a higher collaboration between citizen developers and pro developers. There is a high adoption of Power Platform across the citizen developers, and they can leverage built-in connectors to consume data from Power Platform. But when they need to access some private data, some specific data for which there is no connector, then the pro developer there can empower them, can help them by building these APIs elsewhere and expose these APIs to Power Platform to create a custom connector. So we create a high collaboration between the pro developer and the citizen developer through that scenario. Now let's look at the Azure services that we have that fit these different technologies. So on the top left, you can see the container services that we have here. We mentioned Azure Kubernetes Services, Azure Container Apps, Azure Spring Apps, Azure Red Hat OpenShift. What they are meant for? Well, these services will fit different use cases. Let's say I'm using Spring Boot, for example. If my application is actually built upon Spring Boot, then that's a primary use case for Azure Spring Apps. Azure Spring Apps being a service we offer, which is fully managed to be able to deploy Spring Boot application. But it also supports polyglot application. It's not limited to only Spring Boot, but you can actually deploy other framework as well. You're working with OpenShift on-prem. We have Azure Red Hat OpenShift, which is a fully managed service as well for OpenShift. Then, if you need more flexibility, and you want to actually have access to the worker nodes for compliance reasons, or you want to add your own operators, for example, AKS is a great fit. For example, let's say you're working with WebLogic or WebSphere. You can absolutely deploy that on AKS. Well, on another scenario, maybe you don't want to care at all about the infrastructure. The only thing that matters to you is deploy your application in a microservices architecture, still leverage container, but you don't want to hear about the infrastructure at all. Azure Container Apps is a great fit in that case. And these services are not limited to one or two frameworks. You can bring all the framework you are working with into these services. From a serverless perspective, we look at two key services, Azure Functions, Azure Logic Apps. Azure Functions is our serverless compute, which basically execute upon a trigger. So I mentioned a couple earlier, like an HTTP trigger, following a queue, or actually watching a row in a database. These are different kind of triggers that you can use, but there are many more. And in terms of language, you can actually leverage Azure Functions with C, in fact, yeah, but Java as well, JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, and more. Azure Logic Apps, on the other hand, is actually more a low-code approach for pro developers to build complex workflows, but which allow them to integrate with backend systems which do not have APIs. So, for example, let's say you want to talk to an Oracle database, for example. You want to do some work of transformation through your data. You can build a complex workflow with Azure Logic Apps, which is a graphical a solution to build your workflows, leveraging connectors to talk to backend systems which do not have necessary APIs. And so you can build that full logic to transform your data and then push back that data to another service that you may have in your application. To fit together these APIs and Azure Functions, we rely on a key service, which is API management. API management comes with three different components, really important. One, the management itself, allowing you to manage your APIs, handle as well authentication, authorization, but also apply policies to APIs. Think about throttling policies, for example, transformation policies as well. And speaking of transformation, APIM provide some basic features of data transformation, but when it's actually not enough for your use case, that's where you would like to extend by using Azure Logic Apps. And then lastly, data, of course. We have a breadth of database services, managed database services, coming from relational database to non-relational database, and all coming with different set of replication settings, scaling capabilities for you to use. And lastly, Azure Arc that I mentioned earlier in terms of being able to deploy cloud application anywhere. So Azure Arc is not only meant to have a single control plane for all your Kubernetes cluster, but it also actually allows you to bring to the edge or any location, in fact, some of the Azure services. For instance, we can bring Azure Functions into a Kubernetes cluster through Azure Arc. We can bring Azure SQL databases, Azure Postgre databases. And so this allows you to, literally speaking, bringing these powerful Azure services down to the edge or any other location of your wish. So adopting cloud native to drive innovation is great leveraging technology, but it's not enough. We need two more things. First, we need the best-in-class tool from code to cloud. Second, security is paramount. We absolutely want to be able to embed the security directly into the developer workflow. And that's exactly what we do at Microsoft by providing a unified solution from code to cloud in which security is a concern for every step. So from the left-hand side of my slide, you can actually see the IDE options that you can find, starting with Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio. If you want to work locally, then if you want to have an options to code anywhere, you can rely on CodeSpace from GitHub, or Microsoft DevBox, which is a fully pre-configured development machines hosted on Azure. And all these four services are powered up by GitHub Copilot that you can use and OpenAI services. So think here about assistant, AI assistant to help you to build code faster and better. For instance, Copilot is built upon Codex in terms of model, but as you've heard from Paul and from Inu, we're investing heavily into bringing more AI into our services to help you to be more productive. From a source control perspective, we use GitHub repos, where you can actually enable GitHub advanced security features, which allow you to do dependency scanning, secret scanning, and code scanning. Then comes the CI/CD pipeline, the whole DevOps story we were talking earlier. There you have a choice between Azure Pipeline and GitHub Actions. So depending on where you have the most experience or where you have the most affinity, you can go with one or the other. Then in terms of identity management, and let's say that's when you want to instill that zero trust model into your workflow, you can absolutely onboard with Azure AD. And all these components together on Azure provide that seamless experience and integration where they're all connected together. For example, the GitOps practice I was talking about earlier, you can enable it with just few clicks from the Azure portal toward monitoring that GitHub repo. So if there is a key message that I want you to keep with you as a takeaway there is we meet you where you are. It doesn't matter what programming language that you use. It doesn't matter what tool you use or either the strategy that you're following in terms of cloud adoption. Could it be hybrid? Could it be cloud first? Could it be multi-cloud? We can actually help you and support you across all these scenarios with a set of services that we provide, but also the expertise that we have. As mentioned earlier by Enu and Paul, we have a lot of experts at your disposition to actually help you along that cloud native journey. There is another thing that I did not mention here, but which is very much important. When we talk about DevOps and DevSecOps, it's not only anymore about application, but it's also about infrastructure. You really want to lean in as well in terms of tooling and practices, infrastructure as code. And even there, we actually support you with the tools of your choices. We don't force you to use ARM or Bicep. We can absolutely work with Terraform, for example, which is one of the most used tools out there. So you will find here some additional resources for you to get started if you're interested in diving deeper into these services. This was a 10 to 12 minute talk, maybe a bit beyond. So thanks for the extra time, Enu and Paul. It was really welcomed, but I'm really happy to get connected if you're interested into learning more into some of these specific services and what it means to actually adopt a cloud native journey on Azure. Thanks, everyone. I'm available for any questions. If we have any question in the chat, Jonathan, I didn't watch the chat at all. Do we have any question? I guess not.
Guys, if you have any questions, then feel free to write down in the chat box. We would love to answer all your questions.
Well, I will leave it to you then, Pradeep, to pursue the event. And guys, if you have any question, even that come later, put them in the chat. We can absolutely come back to you later. Leave your email, ask your question, and we can absolutely address these questions in an offline way. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alain, for this wonderful session. And now we would like to move on to our next session, which is which is updating existing apps to cloud first model. For this session, we have with us Jay Lee. Jay is a seasoned cloud native specialist. He is helping enterprises embarking on the journey of building cloud native applications and implementing DevOps on container platforms. He is working as a cloud native global black belt at Microsoft Singapore. Welcome, Jay.
Right. Let me share my screen. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen quickly. All right, you see my screen? Is it coming through? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Right. Let me share. Okay. Right. Yeah. Can I start?
We can see you, Alain, but not yours. Sorry, we can see you, Jay, but not your
Screen.
presentation. At least not for
Really?
me.
Okay. Is that all for everyone? Is it just for Pradeep only?
For me as well, Jay.
No, we
So you
can't
might have
see
to
your screen.
Oh my God. What's going on? Sorry for trouble. Okay. Let me share the screen again. What about this time?
Yes,
Yes.
it works.
Now
Yes.
Works. Okay, great. Thank you. All right.
Uh, but it
it's
went back again. Sorry. We saw the desktop, but it's
yeah,
gone.
we could see the see your presentation, but now it's gone again.
Oh my God. What's going on? Sorry for the trouble. Okay.
No worries.
What's going on? How about now?
Now it's visible.
Visible and is moving as well.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks everyone. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Jay Lee. I'm a principal solution architect. Oh my God.
It's gone again.
All right.
I
Let me
think
share my whole screen. Okay.
yeah, presentation mode may be getting lots of it.
And now? How?
Yes, it works.
Yes.
Works?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh my God. Just stop sharing again. Why? Let me try
It's
again.
time to kick off your AI to fix it for you, Jay.
Yeah, I need yeah.
Where is Copilot?
Hopefully AI to fix this problem. Okay. So yeah, let me introduce myself again. My name is Jay Lee. I'm a principal solution architect from Global Black Belt team. So I'm helping the customer to take on the journey of cloud native. So what I mean by that, right? Cloud native journey, right? I talk to the customer every day where they have like old legacy on-premise or even the application running on VMs where they want to migrate and modernize to cloud. Okay, so my topic today, even though it's only short 10 minutes, I will speak briefly about what kind of principle that you can apply to updating your existing apps, like mostly legacy application to cloud. And along with that, I want to actually speak a bit more about the languages part as well, because Alain just mentioned that Microsoft as a company, we are open for any programming language, which is often missed by industry and even the developers. Okay, so if you don't know about this, we have a Python creator working at Microsoft, and we are doing a lot for Java as well. Okay, so basically Microsoft is not just a .NET only company, right? So if you look at what we do, especially I'm talking about Java because Java is my own, my specialties. Okay, I'm a like Java SME at Microsoft. Just briefly tell you about what we do for Java as a open source community and the company. So we do have, of course, right? You must be using VS Code already every day to write your own code, right? So it has a very nice Java extension already. You can write and run your Java application. And of course, right, GitHub is where the most of sources are hosted. As an open source, right? There are a lot of
Hey, Jay,
repositories. Yeah.
just a
Yes.
second. This is Pradeep. Sorry, your thing has gone off again. So just give a second. I think I'll ask Chaitanya. Chaitanya, can you share the slides or Surag, so that we can just share it?
Yes, Pradeep. Yeah.
All right. Is it because of my laptop or what?
I think Jay, you may the screen share may be the issue. If you can just put it in not in presentation mode, it may not be like, I think it works, is what I feel.
Is it? How about now? Is it better?
Yeah, that's working.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Cool. Yep. So back to where I was. Okay. So again, we have like 3.6 million Java repositories hosted on GitHub. And as you know, right, we are actually giving those for free for open source project, right? So GitHub is the best place to host your Java open source application. And we do have our own version of JDK, right? For Java application, you need the JLE or JDK. And then we do have our own like Microsoft built OpenJDK, right? So we are part of the OpenJDK, project, and of course we have provided all those Spring dependencies, libraries for developers to write your code fast on Azure. And we are member of the multiple Java projects like Java EE and Microprofile, and we also the member of the Eclipse Foundation, right? So if you know, or if you believe that Microsoft is a .NET only company, I think it's a great time to break your perception, because we do actually way more than only .NET, right? We do support different languages. Okay, so we have this Microsoft build up OpenJDK. So with that, let's talk about modernization journey. Now you have your nice old legacy, maybe not legacy, but old application running on premise, and where you want to adopt the cloud native approach so that you can run those safely on cloud. What would be the journey look like, right? What you can do about it, how to change or how to enhance or how to basically modernize your application, right? So there are two approaches I can think of, and those are actually the most common question from the developers. I want to modernize my application, and how, right? Where do we start, right? So depending on your application, right? Sometimes it's extremely difficult to containerize it and run it on the platform, right? For that, and we have, of course, the natural option, which is the infrastructure as a service, right? You can just migrate your VMs and application to the cloud first, then you can, filter down your, the portfolio of your application using like AMMP that was introduced in earlier session. Then you can tackle those applications like one by one, right? So you just define very clear migration project with a very concrete deadline to actually address your business urgency, right? So then you can group like 3 or 5 applications in each project, and you can avoid those lengthy assessments, right? Actually, AMMP can come in this nicely, because you can again give you the nice overview of your portfolio and what you can do about it, right? So then you can, if you are like adamant to move fast, right? Then you can also consider maybe migrate and modernize in parallel, which is a bit more difficult, but it actually makes sense in a way, because your business is always moving, right? You always need a new feature while you are migrating your on-premise apps to the cloud, right? So let's say if you need 2 years to migrate everything from on-premise to cloud, during that 2 years, right, you cannot really you cannot bring the value to your users and your company, right? So maybe if you can take this approach, right, migrate and modernize in parallel might make more sense to you. Okay, so those are two different approaches, and I see actually more of this approach, right? Both migrate and modernize in parallel at the same time. Now look at how you can transform your application, right? So I mean, everyone's talking about cloud native, and it's like a nice term to hear, but what you can do about it, right? Because your application is not really cloud native yet or cloud ready yet, right? So what you can do about it? So I mean, I mentioned this earlier, right? Is cloud native is like a journey, right? Transform your way of working, transform your way of developing your application, and transform the way of operating your application on cloud. It's like a journey, right? You cannot just go there one day, right? It's actually the gradual approach where you can become like cloud ready to cloud native. And along the way, there are several things that you can consider as a developers, right? That's where I'm getting to in this session. So I want to start with this, right? 12-factor application. It's not just for actually just building microservices or like building cloud native applications, but it's about building your application for cloud, right? So that this 12 principle, okay, like a best practices, you can apply to your current application, right? On-premise application, so that you can gradually transform your application to be ready to run in the cloud or on the cloud. Okay. So there are 12 different principles, but since we don't have much time for today, I will briefly speak about 6 to 7 key factors. And along with that, I want to explain to you how you can leverage Azure services for that. First and foremost, your 12-factor application code base, you should have a single code base, and you should be able to deploy across a different environment, right? You're not supposed to have a different code base per like dev, UAT, and prod. Same code base with a different configuration. You should be able to deploy across different environments. And for that, again, we have a nice DevOps offerings. GitHub, Azure DevOps, if you're using it, thank you. If not using it, GitHub and the Azure DevOps pipeline is very powerful and should be able to use the features like advanced security, Azure pipeline and action, GitHub actions and Azure DevOps pipeline. You should be able to build this CI/CD with an immutable release very easily and deploy across the different environments. And configuration, right? Usually as a developer, you might be already like storing your configuration, like a password certificate into your code, which you're not supposed to do. So you should think about externalizing your configuration. And actually Azure has a very nice path called Azure Configuration Service, where you can store your sensitive application information like credential on URLs and everything. Okay, it can be even integrated with the Azure Key Vault, right? So you can safely store your credentials on Azure as a pass. Backing services. So you should be able to detach and attach the backing services to your application without changing much code, which is a bit tricky to do, right? But we have this nice feature called Service Connector, and Service Connector is available for our all application platform. It includes container apps, Azure Spring apps, and app service, and etc. Okay, so you can easily attach and detach the backing service like PostgreSQL, Redis, and Cosmos DB without changing much code online. Okay, so we have this service connector and the backing services. Yeah, processes. So about having again those backend data services, right? You're not supposed to store any information locally, and for that you have we have this service called Cache for Redis, where you can offload the stateful information to the cache. Right. So sticky session is actually the clear violation of this principle called processes. So you can offload your session to Azure Cache for Redis safely. So you don't need to persist any state information into your application because it doesn't make sense for your container application running on cloud. And port binding, as a cloud service vendors, right? You should be able to just deploy your application first as a container or even on VM, and Azure as a platform should be able to assign your own domain or IP addresses accordingly, right? So port binding, like is easily achievable. If you're using the cloud providers like an Azure. Concurrency is basically about adapting the containers, right? Containers basically stateless, and you should be able to scale out and scale in easily as you want, right? So we have different Azure application platform, okay? From IaaS to container platform as a service to PaaS to function as a service. I bet we have the best portfolio of your application, Okay, so if your legacy application can only run on the VMs, right? You can just easily move it to infrastructure as a service. If you are ready to run containers, then we have this nice service called AKS, and we have a even service called Azure Reddit OpenShift. So depending on your requirements, if you want to have OCP running on cloud without you managing it, we have an arrow as a Reddit OpenShift. If you're keen on trying out the vanilla open source Kubernetes, then AKS is the way to go. And PaaS, if you don't want to manage your platform at all, right? I don't want any complexity. I have nobody to manage my platform, but I want to deploy and run my application. Then we have this PaaS service called App Service, Azure Spring Apps and Container Apps, and they were all described well by my friend Alain in the previous session. And we of course have a function as a service where you can run, event-driven applications, right? So along with that, we have all those databases or cache for you, and we have tooling, vast tooling, right? Microsoft is a developer company, right? We have a VS Code, we have a GitHub, Azure DevOps, you name it. So, and we also have an extension for your own IDE. You choose any tools you want. I mean, we are there for you, right? We give you the right support. Dev and prosperity, which is actually very hard to ensure in the development environment, right? There's always a gap between your dev environment and production environment. So now we acknowledge this problem, and we have this new service called dev environment, right? Azure dev environment. It's not GA yet, but we make sure that your dev environment is exactly the same as your production environment, right? So you can, remove those inconsistency issue between your different environment. And logs, we actually have a very nice pass log solution, right? So you just emit the logs in your application. We collect it, we send it over to our Azure monitor. We even collect your matrices, and you can carry your logs. You can visualize the logs. And if you're using Prometheus and Grafana, we have a many Prometheus and Grafana. You can visualize your monitoring matrices and everything, right? So we have this a nice solution for collecting and analyzing your logs from your application. Okay, so that's pretty much my session. Okay, last thing. Okay, sorry. Just wanna back to my diagram here. So whatever application you have and doesn't matter whether you're using Java, .NET, Python, Golang, Node.js, whatsoever, depending on what you need, right? We have this nice portfolio of the application platform, right? So if you are interested in trying out one of those platforms, let us know. We are more than happy to help. Okay, so that's my session. Do you have any questions?
I haven't seen any, Jay.
Okay, great then. Yeah, I'll be around. Okay, if you have any questions, please put in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay, for this wonderful session. And uh, now let's do a quick poll. Which is your favorite field? Is it cloud computing? Is it AI? Or is it any other field? Write down in the chat box which is your favorite field. So we have so many people who are interested in AI. Nice. So it's time for our favorite session on our favorite field, which is Azure AI. For this session, I would like to welcome Dr. Julia. She is working as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft Singapore. She has helped enterprises by building cloud solution architectures. Welcome, Julia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. Let me start sharing my screen. Please let me know if you can see my slides.
We cannot yet.
Ellen, can you please tell me when you see it? Because I'm sharing already.
Yeah, I'll let you know. For now, we can't.
Okay, wait a second.
Yep, we can now, Julia.
Okay, and in
Still
the present,
Yep.
Still good. Okay, awesome. Let me try to turn on my camera if everything will work together. Okay, I think let's start. So hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Julia Gusakova. I'm Cloud Solution Architect focusing on data and AI, and I work with our partners in the APAC region. So I will be speaking about Azure AI and what are different services available for you and how you can integrate them into the applications. But before we move into the AI topic, it's always important to look at the data, right? So it's actually like whenever we are talking, it's data and AI, they often come hand in hand. And on this slide, you can see like what are the typical benefits, like what you can see like when you're going with a data-driven transformation. So you can see like more than 50% increases in revenue performance. You can get almost 50% faster time to market, and you can have improvement in your customer satisfaction and increased profit results. So this is all very important when we are talking about like our systems in production. But like, how does our data state looks today, right? So whenever we are talking about the data, we notice that the volume, variety, and velocity of the data are accelerating dramatically. And actually, like today, we live in the reality when we generate data way faster than we're able to process and understand it, right? So whenever we're looking at our data estate, here you see some typical questions like, what data do I have? And the bigger your system grows, the more spread are these data sources. And we're usually talking not about like just one or two databases. We're talking about tens or more, right? Like when you are able to understand like how does your data estate look like, the next question is like, is my data even trustworthy, right? So and then like, because ultimately you don't want your data to just sit in your databases, you want to have some insights and use it, right? So then the next question is often like, can people access the data needed to make the right decisions? So can your business owners access this data timely also? So there are two parts, like how do you provide all this access to all the data which you have, and how do you do this in a timely and secure manner? And of course, whenever we're talking about like data, it's compliance always comes into picture, and especially like the data security. And historically, when we look at the data estate and actually like all the different services available, right, for the data governance, analytics, and operational databases, often they are quite disconnected and fragmented. And a lot of times you might need to spend time on actually like trying to integrate these services together and make the whole system work, rather than on actually like bring some business value. So the question is, and this is the bigger the systems, the more effort you should spend on all these integrational aspects, right? So, but is there something like what could be changed? And so with Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, right? So there is this unification of all the different data, like data services, and not only the data services. So there is a very smooth integration between our operational databases like SQL, Cosmos DB, like in any flavors of databases which you find on Azure, with Azure Synapse Analytics, with Azure Databricks, and also with our governance product like Microsoft Purview. And you can also, like, there is also an inbuilt integration with Power BI, so you can visualize and get your data insights quickly. And of course, all of this is integrated with our data warehousing solution like Azure Synapse Analytics, and of course with Azure AI services, right? So with Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, you can actually like significantly lower the time which you spend on the trying to integrate all these previously fragmented services together by simply establishing connections between them. And this will remove a lot of time which you spend on these tasks, and will allow you to focus, so people who are building systems on creating value, right? So this, and even over here, we see that there is a integration between all these data services with our Azure AI capabilities. So let's have a look at their AI portfolio, like which we have. So whenever we are talking about building solutions, we always think about also like about citizen developers and our developers and data scientists. And the first, like on top of this slide, you see that we have like a Power Platform with where you also have AI capabilities available for you, like in the AI Builder. But let's focus on Azure AI. So if you look at this slide, you can see three broad categories which are over here. The first one is applied AI services, and these are the services like which are scenario specific. So you have a pre-built model, a high quality model, like which you can quickly integrate into your application and infuse these AI capabilities. The second group is our cognitive services, which provides you more than 30 models across vision, speech, language, decision, and now OpenAI domains. And but significant difference, and what is like quite different for cognitive services, they allow you to customize the models, but that doesn't mean that you will have to build your model from scratch, right? So, and depending on your appetite and the amount of fine tuning which you might need, you can use either one or the other. And later I will share like a few examples, like where this difference lies between cognitive services and applied AI services. And at the bottom you see ML platform, which is our Azure machine learning. So this is actually a huge platform for you to develop and develop and build custom models from scratch. So let's look at our Azure Applied AI Services. So actually the whole term of Applied AI Services appeared just 1 or 2 years back. So before that, it was all the services were under the umbrella of cognitive services, but you can clearly see that there are some differences between them. So applied AI services, they actually bring together cognitive services with task-specific AI and business logic. And they actually help you to build like faster and integrate these AI capabilities into your applications faster. Like, so your development cycle could be reduced like from months maybe previously to just days. How you can integrate them into your application. So there is a number of SDKs available and for different languages. So it's not only Python, but if you use Python, there are Python SDKs, there are SDKs for .NET and Java. So this is like on any stack which you use, you will be able to do that. But even if the SDK is not available, you can still, there is still a way for you to integrate it, because in principle, you are just calling the REST APIs, which are exposed to you, right? So even if the SDK is like for whatever reason you cannot use it, or you prefer not to, then you can still go with just making a simple REST API calls and sending your data for processing and then retrieving the results. So if we look at the Azure Applied AI services, we see that for documents processing, there is a form recognizer, there is a cognitive storage. If you need to build a search solution for your application based on your data. And with cognitive search, it's not only like that you can make your documents searchable, but you can also do more document cracking, extract more data, and make it also searchable and retrievable, like by your applications. We also have like Azure Bot service if you need to implement this, add this bot capabilities into your applications. Video analyzer to extract actionable insights like from your videos. We have metrics advisor, which can be used like for proactive monitoring and diagnosing issues. So if you're building the predictive maintenance solution, this is the service like which you can consider and actually like have a look at, because it's tailored to identify these anomalies in the data, to track, for example, seasonality if there is any, and you can also do like a further fine-tuning of your solution. And of course, we have Azure Immersive Reader, which can help users read and comprehend text. So let's look at a form recognizer, right? So this is a service which actually not only extracts the data from the document, but also adds this business layer of this business logic. And the simple example to look at it is, one is the cognitive service for computer vision. When you just can put in the text document, for example, that's a receipt, right? And you can do a plain OCR. With this plain OCR, you will get all the text from the document. But then if you only use, for example, computer vision read API, which will be just doing the OCR in your document, the next step which you will have to implement in your application is actually adding this layer of business logic. Okay, so for example, you're interested in the total amount from receipt, right, or any other field, then you need to implement this logic. Okay, how do we associate one value with this the value in the text which we see with the key which we want to associate it with, right? So all this logic you have to implement yourself, and you have to think about like, okay, what if we do receive different types of receipts, right? So and with these, like the deeper you go, the more complexity there is. So instead of you just implementing all this business logic on your own, and this is like a problem which a lot of customers face, right? So everybody could be spending time on implementing pretty much the same thing, but just with on different data sets. You can use Azure Form Recognizer, which has been trained on huge amounts of data, where this particular business logic is already implemented. So what will happen with it, like you send this receipt for the processing for the receipt API, and you will get your information extracted as a matter of key value pairs. So if, for example, you want to know like what is the total amount, you just have to fetch that key, and that's and get the value like from your receipt, right? So it and the principle is pretty much the same with all the applied AI services. So they can let you speed up the development and actually like embedding these AI capabilities in your applications very fast.
Julia, sorry to interrupt you, but your slides are not visible. Can you share it again?
Okay, let me try to end the slideshow. Not sure like what happened, because I see that the poll has came up. Okay. What was the last slide you saw? Okay. Can you see the slides now? Let me just move into presenter mode.
Yep. It's
back. Okay, let me just quickly go to where we should be. Okay, yeah, so this was Azure Applied AI Services, and now we are moving to cognitive services. And thank you, Tim, for telling me that they are not visible.
The cognitive services was the last one we haven't seen, in fact, yeah.
Yes, okay. Okay, yeah. So now you should be able to. Yeah. So the next group of services is cognitive services. So this is a comprehensive set of pre-built AI capabilities and models which are easily accessible for you, again, like with RESTful APIs. So in a similar way, how you can integrate the applied AI services by a matter of like either using SDKs which are available, or by just like calling the REST endpoints which are available. In a similar fashion, you can integrate the cognitive services. And cognitive services, they cover different domains, and they not only provide you with models which are available, but they also give you an opportunity to do some fine tuning which you might need. Right. And to do all these customizations, you don't need to train your models from scratch. And we'll see this in a bit, for example, for custom vision. So for speech, in terms of the capabilities, you have a capability and a model to do the speech to text transformation, text to speech. You can do speech translation, speaker recognition, and there is a big amount of neural voices for different languages which are available over there. You can also implement solutions for the speaker identification, and you can also do the pronunciation assessment. So like for all the different applications which you are building for different domains, there is a service like which might be useful and which you can integrate into your application, and for example either provide more services to your users or maybe make their experiences more smooth. Right. So for the language domain, we have sentiment analysis, entity recognition, language understanding, translation, and with these models, you can do the key phrases extraction, PII handling. You can there is also like a separate set of models for handling health information, and you can also do the document summarization. And within the language service, you can do the abstractive and extractive summarization. So next for vision, we have computer vision available, and with computer vision, you can do plain OCR, for example, if you don't want to have or you like any business logic on top of it, like a form recognizer. Can you still use it in your applications? Absolutely can. You can go with computer vision REST API. You can extract the information about the images, like with the image API. You can do spatial analysis, for example, if you need to track how many people are there in the space. And you can also build custom models for image classification and object detection. So with these custom models, you won't be building these models from scratch, and that means that for training your model, you don't have to have like thousands of images or hundreds of thousands of images. It's enough to have maybe 30 or 50 of them to get started. And in a similar way, like as all the cognitive services APIs, once you do the deployment of your model within the resource, right, you will be able to call it like as a REST endpoint, right? So with vision APIs, you can also implement the identity verification or finding similar faces. So this is using the face APIs. And next domain is the decision. So whenever you need to do like an anomaly detection, so this is again like one of the services like which is underlying. So previously we saw in applied AI services metrics advisor. So metrics advisor adds more. It's a business logic for specific use cases on top of the anomaly detector. And if you still want to use the anomaly detector, be it like in a univariate or multivariate forms, to identify potential problems and see if there is like any correlation between the data, for example, from different sensors, you can still do this like with anomaly detector. We also have content moderator. So this is like for the scenarios when you want to detect potentially unwanted or offensive content. And if you need a personalization capabilities in your applications, for example, like for online stores or e-commerce, right? This is where you can use Azure Personalizer to create rich and personalized experiences for every user. And again, the amount of effort like of building this from scratch versus using the versus integrating the cognitive service will be tremendously different. And Quite recently, we have Azure OpenAI as part of our cognitive services stack. So we'll be talking in a little bit more details in the next few slides about it. But before that, let's look at our Azure Machine Learning platform. So this is an enterprise-grade machine learning service which you can use to build and deploy models faster. So Azure Machine Learning actually provides you a huge set of tools which you can use to develop your models. And when we talk about machine learning and building models from scratch, for people who are just entering the field or don't have so many experience in the data science, it might be it might sound like very complex if you're only thinking about the code first experience. But the biggest advantage of machine learning platform is actually that it has a designer option, which is which provides you a drag and drop experience, right, where you can identify the stages, like for the like how you want to train your model, like what you how you want to split your data, for example, and you can do this in a designer mode, so you won't have like you won't need to write code for this. So with these, even people who don't have a lot of experience and are just starting in the field can start to build their models like from scratch and to train them from scratch. And for the experienced data scientists and developers, of course, there is a code first experience in our notebooks where you can use, for example, Python. Like if you want to, you can use MLflow, and for example, you can also use like Onyx if you need to. So there is a set of capabilities for different level of experience here, and whenever we are talking about Azure machine learning, it's important to know that no matter how you build your models, be it in designer, be it in the code first experience, they will be stored and managed in a central registry. And actually, like most of the all of the artifacts with which you will be working, they will be actually like versioned and tracked. And when we are talking about the moving to MLOps, Azure Machine Learning provides you capabilities to do that. So there is an integration with GitHub, so you can store, like you can have a versioning of all your notebooks, but there is also like integration with Azure DevOps if you want to automate the deployment of your, if you want to automate the deployment of your models and actually do the full MLOps cycle. So with this, you can achieve more reproducibility and when you are just developing building the model, during the model validation, model deployment, and retraining it, right? And one more important capability which should be mentioned here is automated machine learning. So whenever we are talking about the building and building the model, like you have often you have to compare how the different algorithms will perform for this problem, and like you have to do the hyperparameter tuning, and often this would require some coding and scripting, and then like going through the results and trying to compare. And the question is, can you do this in a more efficient way, where all this orchestration, where you will be defining like what are the, for example, what are the algorithms which you want to try, and then you just like go through the results, and all the training is automated behind the scenes. And the answer to this is actually the automated machine learning. So this is the component which takes care of all this orchestration, and so you can focus on you won't have to spend so much time of coding it, and rather than it's going to be like more of configuration of your AutoML run for specific problems which are supported, and then you will be just like about doing the evaluation of comparing the evaluation of different models with different hyperparameters and finding the best performing one. But this is about the development of models. When we are talking about like how do you train your models? And of course, there is a question of the compute, and the compute is readily available over there for you. You can use either CPU instances, GPU, FPGAs, whatever you need. You can use it for training, and in the similar way, like the deployment, a lot of for the model deployment, a lot of things are taken care of. So you can deploy your models to AKS, but you can also deploy them to managed endpoints. So this is one of the recently added capabilities over there, where if you don't feel comfortable with managing on the infrastructure in AKS clusters, then you can just use managed endpoints, and everything will be taken care of by the Azure, right? So, and with this, we will move into looking into a little bit of a history of artificial intelligence and how did we end up where we are today. So the artificial intelligence field has long and storied history, which spans many decades. And some of the earliest works are actually they were done in 1950s or 1960s. And at that time, researchers first began to explore the possibility of creating machines that could think like humans. So this is maybe some 70 years ago. This is when it started. And today we live in the reality where we already have the generative AI. So generative AI is a subfield of the artificial intelligence, which focuses on creating systems that can generate examples, such as, for example, images, text, or speech, which are similar to examples given in the given data set. So when we talk about generative AI models, they can be classified into broad categories, the generative ones and discriminative ones. Generative models, I'm sure many of you have heard by now, include GPT-3, DALL-E, variational autoencoders, or which learns the underlying probability distribution of the data set and can generate new examples from the learned distribution. Discriminative models, such as deep neural networks, learn to differentiate different classes or categories, and are generally used for tasks such as image or speech recognition. And so here you can see some of the examples of from the generative AI, and they were actually done with the Azure OpenAI service, which allows you to generate content using the APIs, and you can build prompts that ask to generate it. Text, as for example, what you see in the first three examples, or you can ask it to generate, for example, database queries or any code structures. And it's like, so, for example, in this example, to generate a code database query, you actually need to give a little the definition of the table, right? Which columns are there, and then to describe like what is like here we see how the SQL query is described in simple terms, and then the response is actually the SQL query which you can use, or you can use it to generate images. So your prompt includes the description of how the image should look like, and the result will be the image. And like, what is very interesting is that you can customize Azure OpenAI models with your business data. So this is why, like, actually having a well structured data estate, and actually like understanding your data estate is important, because there are scenarios where you can use pre-built models, but there are often scenarios where you need to do some customizations, and whenever you need to do some customizations, you need to perform some additional training, and for additional training you need to get the data on which you train, right? And if you've never collected the data, then first step for you will be, okay, how do you collect the data before you even can move to this next customization steps? And so let's look at the Azure OpenAI service, and like what are the capabilities over there. So Azure OpenAI provides REST APIs, access to OpenAI's powerful language models, including GPT-3, Codex, embeddings, model series. So these models can be easily adapted to your specific task, including but not limited, for example, to content generation, summarization, semantic search, natural language to code translation, and users can access these APIs either it can access the service either using the REST APIs or Python SDK, or you can actually use Azure OpenAI Studio. So it's important to note here that if you want to integrate it, then it's going to be the integration between all, like how you integrate this OpenAI and actually like all the cognitive services into your applications is pretty much the same. You either go with REST APIs or you use SDKs. And it's not different from all the cognitive services that there is a studio experience available, because when you're just starting to work with a service, you might want to just like quickly see how your results would look like, and get some code samples, like how you can integrate with the service. So all this is typically provided into your in the studio experience. So with Azure OpenAI, customers get actually the security capabilities of Microsoft Azure while running the same models as OpenAI. And also with Azure OpenAI, you have private networking, regional availabilities, and also responsible AI content filtering. So what are actually the models which are available within Azure OpenAI service? So GPT-3, which is a series of models that can understand and generate natural language. And the like within the Azure OpenAI service, it includes also ChatGPT model, which is currently in preview. So when we talk about this large language models, just to see its evolution, for example, GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters, while its predecessor, GPT-2, has about like 1.5 billion parameters. So when you look at the development of these models, you see how big of a jump and in a number of parameters is happening over there. And yeah, the same was in the similar sort of jump was with GPT-1. So when we talk about ChatGPT, it's currently available in preview, and it's a fine-tuned version of the GPT 3.5, which has been trained and runs on Azure AI infrastructure. And if you have tried the ChatGPT on the web and you feel like having it would have been great to have it in your application or your solution, then this is actually possible, because you can do this now with Azure AI, and so you can actually have a similar experience and available in your own applications, and you can also like do a customization on your data if needed. So recently it's been announced that the GPT-4 is available in preview, and these set of models actually improve on GPT-3, and it can understand as well as generate natural language and code. So these models are in preview, and the GPT-4 can solve difficult problems with a greater accuracy than any of OpenAI's previous models. So similarly to GPT 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4 is optimized for the chat, but works well also for traditional completion tasks. And then we have also a Codex. Codex is a series of models that can understand and generate code, including translating natural language to code. Like this is what we saw in one of the examples before. So with Codex models, they are actually descendants of the GPT-3, and they were trained actually on both natural language and billions of lines of public code. And then we also have the embeddings. So this is a set of models that can understand and use embeddings. And embedding is an information dense representation of semantic meaning of piece of the text. And there are currently 3 families of embedding models which have different functionalities, like similarity, text search, and code search. So whenever we are talking about the models like and model capabilities, Each model family typically has a series of model which are distinguished by capabilities. So for example, for GPT-3, models use names such as Ada, Babbage, Curie, and Da Vinci to indicate the relative capability and cost. And if you look, for example, at Da Vinci is more capable, but is more expensive. Right, so there is always this balance which you will have to find, like which model are you going to be using? Like, do you need it to give you answers fast, or you can allow a little bit of delay, and you need more capability, right? And they all do work best for specific use cases. And important, it's very important to note about Azure OpenAI that in this service, you can use supported OpenAI models as is, or if needed, you can adapt and customize the AI models to meet your specifications with labeled data for your specific scenarios. And this could be done again with using REST APIs. It's important to note that your use of Azure OpenAI service incorporates the Microsoft's responsible AI approach, which includes filtering and moderating content of user requests and responses to ensure that coding and actually language AI models are being used only for their intended purposes. But I'll be talking about responsible AI in few slides, right? So how do you get started? So with Azure OpenAI, this is just this example just shows like how you can use the OpenAI library, which is available for Python. And like, what is interesting here to note is that this is a chat GPT. So we're using GPT 3.5 Turbo, and the data which we need to pass is actually the list of messages. If you want to put like a list, this is like an array of messages like which we send into the service. And here, if you look at the first one, this is I would say the interesting one, because you see that the role is system, and this is where you can set the content and actually how your system should respond and how your model should respond. Right, so here you see that we are setting content to like your helpful assistant, and then you see the response. So the question is about like customer managed keys, and yes, most of the services support customer managed keys, right? So, but then if, for example, we want to have, we will set this content to your speaker at the conference, look at the response which you will be getting from the model, and it's the same one. So there is, the only difference between the two responses is actually like this system message which we're setting, and the response is more formal. It gives a little bit more details. For example, like it mentions Azure Key Vault, and like that how it could provide another additional layer of security. So this is where you can actually define and set like how your models should be behaving. And so when we're talking about the ChatGPT and this ChatGPT model, so this model is designed for conversational interfaces, and for example, GPT-3 is text in and text out, and meaning that you send the prompt string and return a completion to append the prompt. But in ChatGPT, you actually have the conversation in, and this is what you are passing in this messages array, and the output is the message. So few things. Another few things like which should be mentioned is that you need to be aware of the token limit, and so whenever you're sending this messages arrays, like the limit would apply for all the messages sent and the response as well. And here you see the screenshot of how the Azure OpenAI Studio would look like. So it gives you a visual way, like way to try, for example, summarization of an article. And if we go over there, you can have for summarization an example how this could look like. You will have some parameters which you can fine tune, and you can get even the sample code for how you can call this API, how you can get the data, and how you can do the processing, right? So the studio experience is similar with all the cognitive services studio experiences, because for any cognitive service and applied AI service, often there will be a studio where you can go and see the sample requests and responses, like how the data will be processed, and this will require like a minimal effort from you. So you can explore these options like within maybe half an hour or an hour. And let's move. I wanted to to show a few architectures. So how it would look like to, for example, integrate these cognitive services into your application. So over here, you see the document process automation, for example, where you see the documents which are later, where you have some data extracted by form recognizer. The documents are indexed by cognitive search, and the data is stored into Cosmos DB. And also we have our Azure function, for example, invoking Azure OpenAI service API to do, for example, a summarization of the documents, and this data again could be stored in the Cosmos DB. And also, like, it could be this either surface to the web application, or, for example, to our like Power BI. And in this solution, like, right, the example is just to illustrate how you can integrate the OpenAI, but actually, like any cognitive service or applied AI service, you can use pretty much the same pattern, where you invoke these APIs from the Azure function app, and then like you process the results within the function. You can store them. You can if this was an API call from the web application, you can pass the results back. And whenever we are talking about the integration with cognitive services and applied AI services, you can actually like sequence them in your applications. And here you see the architecture, how to which shows like how you can build the intelligent apps. So this one is a little bit more different. So here you have like a different data sources, and you again have the function app, like, which will be invoking cognitive services APIs. But this again, this is not limited to only cognitive services. That could be also like applied AI. And again, the data is stored in this case, like, for example, to Cosmos DB, but you can use like the database, like, which is more which is suitable for your solution, or like which you're using in your stack. You can also integrate Azure machine learning, in the sense that you can use the data, which is, for example, in Cosmos DB, you can use it for training, and then you can have your models deployed. And for example, again, if you need to, you can invoke you can call them from your function app. Right. And again, this will enrich your experience in your web applications, or maybe you just need to do some visualization based on the predictions made by your deployed models. And with this, we're moving to a very important part, especially like for all of you like who are building the systems like which have these AI capabilities. And this is the topic of responsible AI. So responsible AI is an approach to developing, assessing, and deploying AI systems in a safe, trustworthy, and ethical way. And AI systems are the product of many decisions, and these decisions are made by those who develop and deploy them and architect them. So from the system purpose to how people interact with AI systems, a responsible AI can help to proactively guide these decisions towards more beneficial and equitable outcomes. So this means keeping people and their goals at the center of system design decisions, and respecting enduring values like fairness, reliability, and transparency. And in the next slide, you see that at Microsoft, these are core 6 ethical principles which are identified that AI systems should adhere to. The first 4, and that's fairness, reliability, privacy and security, and inclusiveness, represent the key properties that systems should achieve. And the second 2, like transparency and accountability, underneath all of the other principles, and they guide how we design, how we implement, and how we operationalize AI systems. And these principles are actually the cornerstone of responsible and trustworthy approach to AI, especially as intelligent technology becomes more prevalent in products and services that people use every day. So with this, my presentation is over. Let me see if there are any questions. I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, I don't think I see many coming, but you can still drop the questions in the chat, so I'll try to reply for the questions in the chat as well. With this, I think I will hand over to our organizers.
Thank you, Julia, for this amazing session. I'm sure everyone has learned a lot today about Azure AI services. With this, we comes to the end of this today event, Azure Open Source Day. And if you have any questions regarding any of the topic with any of the speaker, feel free to ask them in the chat box. And if you are interested in learning more about these technologies, then we have shared some links in the chat box. Do refer to them. Scan this QR code. I hope my screen is visible, and do subscribe to Microsoft Source newsletter to stay updated about the new technology and to learn more about some interesting fields like AI, cloud computing. Do subscribe to Microsoft Source letter. And I would like to thank all the wonderful speakers who gave their time today and shared their experience. I hope you really learned a lot from this event and you are taking back some good memories. So also it's do follow the community guidelines from our next event, and try to be humble and try to be respectful in the chat section. Do scan this QR code and subscribe to Microsoft Source letter. Also, if you haven't joined our community, then if you don't know about us, then here's a quick overview. We have like 30,000 plus developers in our community. So do join this opportunity to learn with your peers. And we have around 3,000 members on Discord. So join us on Discord. You can scan this QR code and join us on Discord if you haven't. And feel free to ask your doubts. If you have any doubts, just feel free to ask them in the chat box. Also, the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. We'll share the link in the chat box. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. So Julia, we have a question for you. What do you think about the role of AI in education system? I hope you are there. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes. Let me take this one. Let me drop a reply in a bit.
Sure, sure. How was the event? Did you guys liked it? Thank you everyone for joining today. We look forward to see you in our next event as well. Thank you to all the speakers for sharing their knowledge, and thank you for giving your time. Since there are no further questions, so I think we can end the session now. Uh, Thank you once again, everyone, for joining today's event. And we look forward to see you all in the next event as well. Also, if there are any doubts or any questions, then feel free to ask them on our Discord server. Do join our Discord and you can ask your doubts over there. We have also shared some links to the resources of today's session, so do check out that as well.
Yes, there is a few questions about the certificate. So the certificate will be receiving your email that you have provided in the form that you have filled. So it will be sent by the end of the day. There is a few changes for the certificate, so we'll be sending it by the end of the day, and we surely be having more trainings and more events in the community. Please make sure you have the updates every week. You check out our community, have a look in the website to make sure you don't miss any new events. So please keep an eye on the community. So if you haven't joined, please do make sure you join the Discord and WhatsApp community. Chief. I hope the certificate thing is cleared. In that case, we will be ending the session now, which means you all will be removed from the session and you can go on with the rest of the day. And please do come back and check in the community. And if there is anything that you have missed to ask or missed to be getting answer, please do mention that in the community. We'll be happy to get back to you and give you a response. So yeah, thank you all again for being in the community and being in the session, and see you in the next sections or the trainings. Thank you.